Hello everyone, my name is Fabian Fröse. I'm a professor and editor of a journal. In this video I will talk about how to review a paper. Many of us have been reviewing papers. Some of you have been invited for the first time to review a paper. I have more than 15 years of experience writing reviews and also reading reviews about my own manuscript that I submit to conferences or journals. And also I've been an editor for more than 7 years, and I've been invited other people to submit their reviews, and I've read hundreds and hundreds of reviews. And when I thought about producing this video, I realized I never learned how to write a review. It's more that I had to do it myself, and I was learning it while doing it. And in order to produce this video, I also read some work on how to review papers. And here I would like to share my experience. And you would start reading the manuscript. That would take time. And then once you've reviewed, taken some notes and so forth, then it's about to write the review. Here I would like to start with some basics. When you write your review, try to be very polite and friendly. Imagine you're writing the review for a friend. Your friend asked you, could you please do me a favor and give me some feedback how I can improve my paper? And I think the same attitude would be good if you have that attitude towards this review, even though it's double-blind peer review. So meaning the author does not know what you are writing. And I all know too well, maybe we all received some reviews from someone else. They're very negative, maybe even nasty. And now you think, hey, it's time to hit back. But I think that's not a very good mindset at all. Think of your friend who's asking you for your help. And that leads me to the next point. Try to be constructive. Provide some developmental feedback. Maybe this was a weakness, but it could be improved this and that way. A third point here I would like to mention would be being open-minded. I think we all have our own ideas, own theories we prefer, own methods, preferred methods. And sometimes authors, they do something very differently. But it would not be good or wise just to try to impose your methods or this and that to that very manuscript. Sometimes it doesn't even make sense, and it would be much better to be open-minded, and maybe we can even learn something from those authors. About the format, I think here that would be very important for me to share, because I've seen so many reviews and they have been so different. Here are some specific ideas what would be good to consider when writing your review. First of all, do's. There are always deadlines by when to submit. Please do so. If you fail your deadline, this will delay the whole review process. This can be very disappointing for authors. If you have already agreed at the beginning, so it would be best also to keep the deadlines. If you struggle to keep deadlines, maybe you can contact the editor and ask, very sorry, can you give me 1 week extension? In most cases, they would grant the extension and then hope that you would deliver your review. Next one, it would be very helpful for the editors, but particularly for the authors, to structure review. I will explain in more detail later. In your review, it would be also important to be specific. Just saying, oh, methods are poor will not help anyone. Try to be very specific. The methods are this and that one, and it could be improved, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, also, if you refer to anything in the text or tables, be very specific. On page 7 or table 1, blah, 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 and so forth, you provide details. In terms of length, I would recommend 1 to 2 pages single space length. Of course, you can provide more details. I don't think that is always necessary. But you can, in 1 to 2 pages, that would be, I think, a good length. Half a page or 1 paragraph would be too short. But 5 pages would definitely be too long. Then you're almost rewriting the manuscript yourself. That's not the point. Only 2 don'ts I mention here. It's a double-blind peer review process, so do not reveal your identity. Some authors or some reviewers, they're kind of funny. They say, oh, you have to cite this and that paper, and then suddenly they suggest, please review and cite these 5 papers, all by the same author, by the reviewer. That is not a very smart way, and there's also a lot of great work not written by you or by me, by other people, and then providing reference to those people would also be very helpful. Some reviewers, they write in the review report that is being forwarded to the author their recommendation. I recommend accepting, I recommend rejecting the paper. That is usually not the call of the reviewer. Multiple reviewers are usually invited, typically 2 to 3 reviews, and then the editor makes a decision whether to accept, reject, or give a revised resubmit decision based on different reviews. And for the author and for everyone involved, it would be very weird if then you find these contradictory or very explicit remarks that only confuses the people involved. I would usually recommend not to do so. What are the main evaluation criteria in a review? Here I've written down some of the most important evaluation criteria. And starting with contribution. That's not random. Contribution is probably the most important evaluation criterion. To determine whether a manuscript has potential and will be invited for revision or will be rejected at an earlier stage. Contribution we can distinguish into theoretical contributions. For most academic journals, theoretical contribution would be by far the most important decision criterion to determine accept, revise, resubmit, or reject. It can, however, it can also be an empirical contribution. Maybe some authors, they collected great data and found some very intriguing results. Maybe they only apply a theory that has been used and tested so many times it's not so exciting, but the study makes a very good empirical contribution. That would be for theory-driven journals not sufficient, but for many journals that would still be important. And then practical implications would be important as well, but less so in academic journals. Then we have theory. It's partly included already in the first part, theoretical contribution, but also in theory in terms of application, understanding, and so forth that is being put well in the manuscript. That would be one criterion. Methods, of course. And here I don't go much in details. I have other videos and there are plenty of articles you can look into that you would evaluate the methodology. Another important aspect that we would pay attention to would be novelty. What's new in this manuscript? And that would be important to highlight that, whether it's new and if not, or how can that be positioned in such a way. And then general writing, structure and so forth, if it's well written in the typical structure you would find in articles in that specific journal, and then also fit, whether that manuscript fits to the specific journal or conferences where it has been submitted. When looking at these different criteria, I think it would be important to emphasize both strengths and weaknesses. Most reviewers, they tend to highlight the weaknesses or deficiency here, problems there and so forth, but they don't talk about strengths. But I think that would be not a fair evaluation. So including both strengths and weaknesses would be important to determine the potential of a manuscript. Talking about the structure of the review, I think that would be my recommendation to you, to follow the structure that I'm here outlining. We would start probably with one paragraph, a brief summary, talking briefly about the contributions, the potential, and major strengths and major weaknesses of the manuscript. A brief summary, so one paragraph. And then probably the end of the paragraph is very typically, in the following I will outline major comments and minor comments and so forth, and then you provide those comments in more detail. And here I would distinguish into major comments, these are very important ones, and then a third into minor comments. These are tiny things that could be more easily fixed. And then you would probably end your evaluation with a very brief conclusion. There can be a few sentences, some final statements, and then also I would usually recommend some references that would help the authors to add something to his or her literature review, or also help you explain the points you made in your review. Let me show you an example. As already mentioned at the very beginning, we start with a summary. Such as, thank you for giving me the opportunity to review your manuscript, blah, blah, blah. I very much enjoyed reading your manuscript. Then you can write briefly about one or two strengths. And you already get the feeling is a positive tone. That's also what we would like to convey. Then, in the second part here, we have major comments. As already mentioned, it's a structured review. That greatly helps authors to respond to your comments. So I have major comments and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for instance. And then I talk about some of the main points, such as literature review. This was very comprehensive, very up to date, blah, blah, or it could be this and that could be added. Theory contribution, again, he would explain strengths and weaknesses, maybe some recommendation, methods. If you have one major method points, it can be even some sub-points. We go into key issues that have been done well and that could be improved, and maybe also some specific suggestion, what kind of method would be better to apply. You would also talk then, or could here another example, and we don't need to go in details. I think you get the picture. Here are major comments that are very critical to consider. Then next we would have minor comments. These are maybe more detailed oriented. Some of them are also not so important. Maybe just could be an idea that you're suggesting. Here are just some examples. Table 1, maybe there's something that couldn't be improved to table 1, or the writing is fine, maybe there's a grammatical mistake. If it's just 1 or 2, you can write the specific page number. If it's in more general, because the writing is somewhat sloppy or it's a non-native speaker, then you can also put this as minor comments and the author, and then conclude with a statement such as, I would recommend hiring a professional copy editor. That would be for me a minor comment, not a major. Then we have a fourth part with a brief conclusion. Here overall your manuscript has great potential. Again, you can give some ideas, but that would be rather brief. You already have the summary here, you don't need to repeat the summary. And then you have the major and minor comments. And then here at the end you would add some references that you have used here in your review, and or also literature references that would be useful for the author to consider when revising the manuscript. All right, let us move back to the PowerPoint presentation. I think what would be also important, actually not when submitting, even when accepting the review, I would encourage you to look into the guidelines of the journal or the conference. Some journals, some conference, they have very specific guidelines how to review a manuscript. They have certain criteria. They ask you to fill out a scorecard or answer some very specific questions. That used to be very common 10 years ago. Now most journals, they simply ask you submit your evaluation report, the one that I just showed to you, and then simply make a recommendation from accept, revise, resubmit to reject. But some journals have specific formats and scoring cards, and then it would be best to look at it before writing the report, so you can answer these questions very easily. When submitting the review, very often there's in the online submission system, there's a box where you copy paste your review, and there's another box maybe below very often where it says something like confidential comments to the editor and so forth. I very much encourage you to use that space. Essentially what you would write in there would be your very brief concluding summary of strengths and weaknesses of the manuscript. It can be just 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences, not more than that. And I know some authors, they copy paste the whole evaluation report into it. No, that's not the point. It's confidential. You can briefly and succinctly explain your key points and why you would reject or recommend accepting the paper. And then when you've done all this, you will probably check once more, and then you can press the submit button, and then you've done your job. Now it's time to wrap up and to provide some recommendations on how to review manuscripts. Starting with first, when you receive the invitation, check very carefully the manuscript, even after you accept the invitation. If you then read into the article, then check whether you know the authors or you have any potential conflict of interest. If so, then contact the editor immediately and reveal your potential conflict, and then the editor most likely would make a decision whether he or she would ask you to perform the review, or very often politely thank you and would ask someone else to review the manuscript. Now the more substantial points. It would be very important in your review to focus on potential contributions. The initial submission might not be perfect, not round, but you can see the potential, like the diamond in there, and together with the editor, reviewers, and the author, you will make it very neat and nice, and so it becomes a very important contribution if you see that. And that would be the most important, because the contribution will make or break the article. And as I talked before, it would be important to highlight both strengths and weaknesses. And then fourth, providing specific and constructive feedback. Not just bad, but how this manuscript could be improved. I think to close this video, remember what I tried to convey before. It's a review process. We are all in there together and trying to write a review that is helpful to the authors. Thank you.